We previously talked about ranking the value resorts, and so I wanted to come today with a video about ranking the moderate resorts. I have stated all of them many nights, and I have a lot of opinions about them, and so I want to go through those with you today to help you make a decision if you are considering one for your trip. First of all, just a reminder that there are basically 4 different levels of resorts at Disney World: value, which I already did a video about. If you haven't watched it already, please go check it out. Now we're doing moderate, and then there's deluxe, and there are villas. Each one has different characteristics and sizes and price points. So let's focus on the moderate resorts today. What the moderate resorts have in common is they all have beautiful architecture and landscaping. So whereas I would describe the value resorts as bright and colorful and fun, I would describe the moderate resorts as beautiful, both in architecture and the landscaping. So if families have young children, I think the moderate resorts are often not as fun as the value resorts are. But for someone like my daughter who definitely appreciates things that are beautiful, I am much more likely to choose a moderate resort for her. They have moderate prices. That's why they're called moderate resorts. They have moderate prices, so they are not as expensive as the deluxe resorts, but they are more expensive than the values. All of the resorts, except for French Quarter, are very large with lots of rooms in them, much like the values, which are also very large. They all feature food courts and have pizza delivery available, which I think is very helpful when you have young ones. Sometimes you just want to pick something up at the food court without having to worry about a restaurant situation. They do, though, have on-site restaurants available at the moderate resorts, except for French Quarter. French Quarter is smaller and has fewer amenities, but when you're at French Quarter, you can go right next door to Riverside and enjoy the amenities there if you would like. They all do have exterior corridors like a motel. This is the same as the value resorts, which means that when you open your door to your room, you're going to go outside. You're not in an interior hallway. They all do have bus transportation to the parks. And 3 of the 4 moderate resorts we're going to talk about today have multiple internal bus stops. And that's very important because if you recall, the value resorts only had 1 bus stop each, but the moderate resorts, 3 of the 4 of them, have multiple. And that definitely impacts your time, the time it takes to get to and from the parks. And so we'll get into the details of that as we talk about each resort. They also do have multiple pools per resort, and unlike the value resorts, there will be the main pool at the moderate resorts will have a water slide, so they have a lot more features available in the pool area, but then they have quiet pools that are spread throughout the resort as well. And finally, many of the rooms at the moderate resorts accommodate up to 5 people, so families of more than 4 often do stay here and consider it to be one of the most budget-friendly options. At the value resorts, the only time you can have a family that's larger than 4 is if you choose a suite. Let's kind of get a feel for where they are located at Disney World. I am choosing to only discuss 4 moderate resorts: Port Orleans Riverside, Port Orleans French Quarter, Caribbean Beach Resort, and Coronado Springs. Disney World considers the Fort Wilderness Cabins to be in the moderate resort category, but to me, Fort Wilderness is kind of its own thing, totally separate, and so I'm only going to talk about the other 4 today. The map here of Disney World, it does show the 4 different resorts. We have a random blue arrow in the middle of the map for some reason, but if you focus on the taupey color arrows, you'll notice that the moderate resorts are a little closer to the parks than the value resorts, but they aren't close enough that they're within walking distance. And like I mentioned, they do use buses to get to the parks, but the commute will be just a little bit less than most of the value resorts. Let's start talking about the rankings of them. In 4th place is Caribbean Beach Resort, and Disney describes it as a tropical paradise built around a 45-acre barefoot bay. This resort hotel brings the islands to you with swaying palm trees, white sand beaches, and colonial architecture. Enjoy island hopping as you explore the lushly landscaped grounds, or simply find a hammock and soak up the sun. And it definitely is incredibly beautiful, and I really do like the architecture and the beaches, and I've walked the entire resort just taking pictures because it was so nice. However, there are 7 internal bus stops at Caribbean Beach Resort, which is worth noting because it takes a while to get to and from places when you are using Disney transportation and you have to stop that many times. You may have seen pictures or seen it in person. There are signs at the bus stops at many or most of the Disney World resorts that tell you when the next bus is coming. And when you're at a resort that has multiple internal bus stops, those screens become almost useless because there are so many stops that you don't know if the bus is going to get full before it ever gets to you. And it's really hard to predict, and it can take quite a while to get to and from. Another characteristic of Caribbean Beach Resort is that the check-in building and the main building, check-in has Magical Express and check-in obviously, and then the main building is where like the food court and stuff is. They're separate, and this is in keeping with the tradition of the Caribbean that they often do have these as separate buildings, but I find it to be kind of inconvenient, especially if you have a preferred room, because the nature of paying for a preferred room is that it puts you close to things. So, you shouldn't have to walk a long distance to get back and forth to the main amenities if you have a preferred room. But at Caribbean Beach, it will put you close to the food court building, but it does not put you close to the check-in and Magical Express where you catch that. So I just find the value of the preferred rooms to be the least value at Caribbean Beach Resort. They do have pirate rooms available to book at Caribbean Beach Resort. I think the heavily themed rooms are really fun, and so I just want to point that out as an option here. However, Caribbean Beach Resort is currently undergoing a 2-year construction project, and that means that in the meantime there's just a lot of going on. It is a major construction site with lots of the amenities being redone. I think when it is complete in probably 2019, we'll have to revisit this ranking to see how I feel, but as of right now, Caribbean Beach Resort is 4th place for me for moderate resorts. Now, as we move into 3, 2, and 1, I have to tell you that for me, these are all very close to each other. So 1, 2, 3, and then the 4th to me is very distant for a variety of reasons, but I really love Coronado Springs Resort. You'll have to figure out after we kind of cover it today if it makes sense for you, but I happen to love it pretty much as I do the 2nd and 1st place resorts. Disney describes Coronado Springs Resort as, they say, relive the romance of Spanish colonial Mexico at this enchanting resort hotel. Find your mythical city of gold in a southwestern-themed haven, from brightly colored casitas to rustic ranchos. Each unique accommodation provides its own unforgettable escape and a welcoming home away from home. And I do think that they execute this theme very, very well. However, depending on your point of view, the fact that it is a convention hotel with more of an adult feel could be good or bad. Because I do not have little kids anymore, and I often travel without kids, period, I really like the adult feel of Coronado Springs Resort, and I happen to really prefer it. Some people, though, will say it doesn't feel like Disney, and so they don't like it as much as I do. The preferred rooms here do put you close to the main building, but not the main pool. It is worth noting that Coronado Springs Resort has the best pool of all the moderate resorts, so if that's important to you, this is a great option. And if you don't book a preferred room, you could book a standard room and be positioned near the pool if you want to request that. But I just wanted to point that out since, as I mentioned, I think preferred rooms, if you're going to pay for them, should give you convenience to as many amenities as possible. At Coronado Springs Resort, there are 4 internal bus stops compared to the 7 that we mentioned at Caribbean Beach Resort. And finally, we have to talk about the construction taking place here as well. The construction here is much more isolated than at Caribbean Beach, or Caribbean Beach has really a much larger overhaul. Coronado Springs is isolated to one area, and so it's fairly easy to avoid it and really not notice it, especially if you're in a preferred room, because they are on the opposite side of the main building from where the construction is taking place. So the construction here does not bother me. I have stayed here while the construction was going on, and I didn't find it to be a problem. Number 2 on my list of moderate resorts is Port Orleans French Quarter, which is the sister resort to Riverside. Disney describes it, they say, revel in the romance and pageantry of New Orleans' historic French Quarter at this moderate resort hotel, where cobblestone streets, gas lamps, wrought iron balconies, and fragrant magnolia blossoms evoke the antebellum era, and colorful Mardi Gras characters and jazz keep things lively. Then stroll along the lushly landscaped Sassagoula River to Disney's Port Orleans Riverside, where the bayou beckons, as do Cajun and Creole specialties. So our family happens to absolutely love New Orleans, and so this theming is just really spot on for us. And the fact that it is a smaller resort than the other moderate resorts can be hugely attractive. They only have 1 bus stop compared to the others, which all have multiple. And they do have a maximum of 4 people in a room, whereas the other moderate resorts allow up to 5. There is no on-site restaurant here. You do give up some amenities when you have a smaller resort, but you can always head to Riverside, which is right next door. So any amenities that French Quarter lacks, I think you can find at Riverside. And they do have a boat to Disney Springs available here as well as at Riverside. So this, if you want a very laid back trip without a lot of, fuss about the buses and walking a long way within the resort and whatever, I think this resort is so fantastic. It's just so compact compared to the others. And finally, number 1 is Port Orleans Riverside, as you may have guessed. From the stately white column mansions of Magnolia Bend to Alligator Bayou's quaint backwoods cottages, delight in a picturesque setting that evokes the romance of rural Louisiana. Take a short walk along the Sassagoula River to French Quarter Resort, known for southern specialties like gumbo, jambalaya, and beignets. Oh yeah, I didn't mention that when I was talking about French Quarter. They have beignets, which is great snack credit on the dining plan if you would like. So Riverside is bigger and it has more amenities, slightly different theming, but in the general same general geographic area. They do have 4 internal bus stops at Riverside. Riverside does get a lot of criticism for their transportation because sometimes it does seem to take a while. They, like French Quarter, have a boat to Disney Springs available, and they have royal rooms available. So I mentioned that pirate rooms are available at Caribbean Beach. The royal rooms are available at Riverside. And I think the royal rooms may be the best themed rooms I've ever seen. They're kind of up there with the Art of Animation suites for me in terms of fantastic theming, but the royal rooms are really beautiful. They are just incredibly well done. So I want to talk about some general tips for moderate resorts. First, I would highly suggest booking a preferred room to reduce walking to the bus stop and to the main amenities. That option is not available at French Quarter because it's small and they don't have that option there. But if you're going to stay at one of the bigger resorts, I highly recommend a preferred room. If you don't book a preferred room, I would make use of the online check-in room request to put yourself next to the whatever is important to you. So you could say, I want to be close to transportation, for instance, in your room requests if you're going to book a standard room. And that is actually point number 2 on this slide, to make your online room requests, including where you would like to be. Third, if you're driving, I think moderate resorts are really, really great because you can park close to your room. So I've mentioned that value resorts have 1 bus stop and that moderate resorts in general have multiple. And I think that if you don't have a car, value resorts might be easier than moderate resorts just because of the 1 bus stop. But if you have a car, you can, in many cases, pull right up to your room. And it is super, super convenient. So if having a car is appealing to you, you may really enjoy the moderate resorts. So I think that'll be it for this video. And if you don't want to miss any videos in the future, please hit the subscribe button. Thanks for joining.